So with that, I will stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to be joined here by Keith Lickenwallner of Pfizer. Again, he heads up cybersecurity risk management of their drug production supply chain. And wow, Keith, you've had quite a busy 12 months, haven't you, with the massive ramp of supply chain to bring vaccine to the world. How's it been?
Oh, it's been a ride. And every time I look at your data, I just think about more things that I need to go take a look at. It's a pleasure to be with you today, Kelly, and to share some of my opinions and how I think the sector needs to keep thinking. But you're spot on with getting what I like to call a look at the total supply chain, start to finish.
Great. Well, Keith, I've got some questions for you. These won't surprise you because we staged all this. So Pfizer, massive supply chain, and as you've shared with me, you really go through supply chain bursts where you have to bring important things to market. So how do you think about understanding supply chain and security risk as it relates to drug production?
Well, fortunately, first of all, I think there's most of us, hopefully on this call, are all in a lucky position to bring, I'm just going to call it often in the market in our sector called the blockbuster drug. The difference here is we had a pandemic that also said, let's do it at record speeds. And that brought additional challenges, obviously. But the foundation, fortunately for us, was already designed and laid so that we could put that to test. And in that, it's really about understanding what are the factors you have access to in data to look at what I call the risk observations for a given vendor, and getting a look from that beginning of raw products you need through each of the steps of the actual business production, all the way to that end final product that really says the patient's treated and we can get paid. So you need the full cycle. So I like to look at it as each step, understand the components that add to each step, all the way through shipment and everything, and then look at what kind of things do I know that could bring me a compound risk scenario that with those two conditions existing can drive me to a point where my likelihood or my impact is a severe beyond our risk appetite. And certainly we had a very tight risk appetite this year for good reasons.
Keith, I think, and I'll put on my former CISO hat, and I have to admit that the previous inherent risk model that I used in assessing, third-party risk anyway, the inherent risk, wouldn't have captured perhaps something like SolarWinds Orion, because it was very data focused and transactional focused, and maybe even system access focused, directly by the vendor. And I think that might be a common theme that, we're having to reassess the criticality of vendors and the importance of them, not just from an integrity and confidentiality perspective, but also availability. You've mentioned to me, you've used label makers as an example of something that might be less obvious risk, but explain that and maybe anchor kind of the thoughts that you talked about within that example.
Sure. I mean, even with your example with remote connectivity, first rule is understand how you're actually opening yourself up. What is your remote connectivity? What are the products you're using? And inventory is foundational. And it gets down to and I'll be honest, years ago, I used to manage a centralized global print team. And I learned tremendously that the business doesn't run without printers. It's the thing that nobody wants to talk about, but it's the thing when it's down, every VP was on my phone. So if you can't print the shipping label, the product doesn't leave the dock. The product can't go in the truck can't pull away from the loading dock. And everything comes to a standstill. So depending upon your operating model, and depending on your just-in-time delivery, and obviously with the vaccine and the cold measures and et cetera, those weren't things that we would tolerate. So making sure that we have complete understanding of, even down to print label manufacturers, extra product, extra printers, backup procedures, all of those things. Business continuity is a tremendous amount of that partnership between the business and IT. But in a lot of cases, it's about, they don't even quite understand all the technology they're leveraging. And your fourth party example is awesome, because that's where they start losing insight and visibility. And when they do, they don't quite understand the risks they're signing off on. And our role, in my opinion, in cybersecurity risk management is to help them be visible. And once it's visible, I find business guys can make the decision about whether to service a pump or take a plant outage just as easy as they can make a decision about cybersecurity if they understand the basics.
Well, thanks, Keith. Another question for you. And you've talked a lot about this, but I appreciate your insight on, from your view, what is the business looking for from cybersecurity in supply chain risk management, and how have you structured your program to meet their needs?
Very much, I think the business looks for assistance on a consistent approach, an education on where they are operating with risks that they probably want to reconsider. So we'll look at everything from, as we understand the actual flow and the architecture that's involved, we can then identify where their weak spots are. And at that point, we start talking about, if this would happen, what's your business continuity plan? What's your disaster recovery plan? And what's your RTO that you expect and need? And I think what really gets into interesting, when you can actually be a cybersecurity person, I have a large amount of industrial plant floor production security experience. And when you can marry that with a business background, you can start asking questions of the business of, is it cheaper to have a second vendor as a backup? Or is it cheaper to stock a little bit more of a warehouse and put an addition on the warehouse? All of those decisions are open and fair game, and the business units are usually quite capable of making those decisions once the scenario is clear to them. So I think our role is really to help make it clear. And once it's clear, let them make the decision. They own the risk, see that they make an educated decision.
So are they taking that input and factoring it into their likelihoods of supply chain outage risk?
Oh, absolutely. We do some quantification work in certain spaces, from all the way from end-of-life systems to which systems are most critical. And as we look at that, whether it be a third party or an internal service, we're looking at trying to really identify which is going to stop the plant, which is going to stop the contribution flow of that plant to its success, and which devices are contributing the most to that end goal. Sometimes you have a system that is truly at risk, but its contributions are minimal, and that's not your high value target. That's not the thing that you want to protect first.
Yeah. One last question, Keith. What framework are you using? I mean, what kind of framework did you use for managing risk during such a massive supply chain ramp?
Well, I'm a firm believer in the keep it simple. So NIST is a foundation that we use across the board. So there's certain guidance and checklists and benefits we can get from there to really understand. But it's really about, back to the basics: visibility, data, analyze and combine it, and then apply the basic structures of risk management to say, this is where I'm operating outside of my risk appetite. So always looking for defining a risk appetite, using every possible equation to write that down with examples, so that you can make sure you're staying in the bounds of where leadership has given you guidance in the past and you've given them guidance.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Keith, we've known each other for a long time, and you do just fantastic work. And I think we all, I don't even think, I know we all owe you a big debt of gratitude. While I was vacationing in northern Idaho last summer, you called up and said, I got to do this mass supply chain ramp. We got to get going. So thanks for your great work, and to the larger Pfizer team. It's just a shining example of the amazing work that can be done in short order by great people. So
it takes an army of people and great partners and great other things to keep not only what we've done with the vaccine and many other companies that have shared in that success, but also, medically critical devices to medically critical supplies for hospitals that are also critical. So we had to make sure not only the supply chain that we're adding is safe and secure, but that we do not jeopardize our existing.